government's purchase of overpriced medical items. Senate Luraban Committee Chair Richard Gordon earlier said the investigation may involve Senator Go and even President Duterte. This is after footage of the two officials meeting with Pharmaly executives back in 2017 was brought to light.
Bakit hindi mo dinefend yung Senado sa Presidente? Diba dapat sabihin niya, Mr. President, Senador ako dyan, nagagalit yung mga kasama ko, Mr. President. Hindi naman niya dapat atakein yung Senado.
Siya ang nanalo sa Tokaton champion. Lahat puro dalda. Kanya ang tanong, kanya yung sagot, at siya magsabi kung mali ka o hindi.
As the Senate continues to investigate Pharmaly Pharmaceutical Corporation, new information is now revealing that the persons behind the company are fugitives in other countries. With standing warrants of arrest, is the government transacting with fugitives who are running a fraudulent company? We discuss in this episode of The Chiefs. Welcome to The Chiefs. Ako po si Robbie Alampay. Kasama po natin Ami Pamituan of the Philippine Star, Lucy Cruz Valdez of News 5, and Ed Lingao of One News. Chiefs, good evening.
Good evening, Robbie.
Happy update.
Ano bang binabantayan natin, Ami?
So happy naman news mo ito i-vaccine over. General public including minors will be vaccinated. O sana matuloy.
So some good news on the COVID front. At saka pati yung numbers natin surprisingly low, although Okta is still projecting that by next week baka humampas daw ng 22,000, 25,000 per day.
At yung Wednesday phenomenon nga yan, di ba? Sinabi natin.
Yeah. Oo.
Tapos sa gitna niyan.
Tsaka, taka lang, September na ngayon, no? So, let's keep up the good mood. We need it. Oh, our next guest needs it.
Sige. Umpisahan natin dyan.
Ayan na yung segue.
We will talk about COVID and of course the political intrigue surrounding it. Now we'll talk about Pharmaly later. But for now, let's talk about Bakuna Bubbles. Joining us tonight, Andy Masigan, Chief Executive Officer of Advent Manila Hospitality Group. Good evening, Andy.
Hi, Andy.
Good evening. Good evening, Rob,
sir.
Ed and Lucy. Great to be here as always.
Good to see you. Welcome back again to the Chiefs. As everybody knows, Andy Masigan is not only an entrepreneur, he's also an economist. That's why we like having him here. He wears both hats when we discuss. And when I lead off with a question, I don't know how you want to take it, Andy, but how's business?
Well, okay. It depends on what industry you're in. But if you talk about anybody who's involved in retail, in transport, in restaurants, in tourism-related industries, it's really a desperate situation now, Rob. So the picture is really not good, no? And with all these affected industries, it has already spilled out to affect the economy at large. So yeah, I'm very concerned about that.
Okay, well, that said, I mean, a month ago, this is one of the things that convinced even Special Advisor to the President, Joey Concepcion, to be open to a lockdown. Sabi niya, well, August, mag-slow down naman, mag-ghost month naman, everybody's taking stock. At the same time, more importantly, let's protect the final quarter because that's where we can make up a lot of ground. Well, here we are. It's September 1, as Lucy pointed out. It's practically Christmas season. So how is the final quarter looking from your perspective?
Well, it's very difficult, Rob, because the start and stop of businesses is not an easy thing to do. You have to remember, some of us in industry, we have, let's say, 400 employees, no? And we have to put them in furlough for a month or 2 weeks, and starting and stopping, accumulating inventory, ramping up production, is not an easy thing to do. So it will take at least 3 weeks to get back on the saddle, no, so to speak. Which is why Joey very wisely suggested this bakuna bubble. The bakuna bubble was patterned after the model of Singapore, France, Spain, and soon to be Indonesia. No, and this is to mitigate the economic impact of the lockdowns on the economy as a whole.
But the problem,
Okay. Oo.
we don't have enough. That's what both the Department of Health and World Health Organization are saying. We don't have enough. We're not there yet. I don't think we're halfway there.
Yeah. Well, Ami, we're not there on a national level, but we're there on an NCR level. NCR is vaccinated at the first dose is 85% and 45% for second dose. And this was as of August 29. So it should be higher right now. And we're very close to herd immunity, okay? And the good thing is that Metro Manila accounts for 37% of GDP. So look, the economy is really tanking. There's no other way to say it, but it's tanking, and I'll substantiate that with actual numbers later. With Metro Manila starting business again, we can recoup some of the lost traction from the lockdowns. So we can save parts of the economy. Many parts of the economy, Ami, are permanently broken already. No, many parts of the supply chain. You talk about electronics. You have different sectors from packaging to welding to capacitors. Many segments of that chain are already closed permanently. So these are things that we have to consider and we have to rebuild, moving forward. And the latest estimate of the Department of Finance was that full recuperation will only be realized supply chain wise 2026. That's a long time from now.
Okay. Andrew, of course, they're saying no na the other factor that should be considered is the fact that the dominant strain now is Delta. So the problem of transmission remains. And while we know that vaccines help against severity and even death, no, transmission continues to be a problem. So kahit daw magbakuna bubble, even if you do that, there will still be transmission at the same rate now and maybe even worse. And people will end up being quarantined anyway. In other words, you're not really containing COVID with a bakuna bubble.
Yeah.
What do you have to say to that?
Okay.
Yeah.
I think we have to put that into perspective, because you will find that and this is DOH data, the fatality rate of COVID is 1.73%. Okay, given the recuperation rate is 91.5%. All right, so 91.5% recuperate, they get better, they go home. But if a business closes, 63 people on average, that's the average number of employees per Filipino corporation, business establishment. 63 people lose their jobs and lose their livelihoods. And the latest data of DTI is that you won't believe this, Luchi, 260,000 business establishments have already indefinitely closed or have declared bankruptcy. And that's how serious the situation is. So it's really a question of what? They're confined in the hospital. 91% of them will recuperate versus 63 people for every business establishment that goes belly up. And this is the reality here. Like for affected industries, for instance, look, it doesn't mean that if it's lockdown, overhead expenses stop. There's still payroll to pay. There's still insurance to pay. There's still rent. There's still utilities, etc. I mean, you have all these expenses accruing without the sales to back them up. So companies with cash runways, with cash reserves are able to survive. But those who don't, they've already closed. Now, those who are still operating like mine, not everyone is a Jollibee, no? So the time, the runway is finite. So our point naman here, sorry if I'm jumping too quickly, but my point here is that COVID is here to stay. It will be a part of life, no? And I can't see how it can be viable to have a lockdown every time there's a
Yeah,
surge.
I,
There has, yeah,
Yeah,
there has to
Andy,
be.
Andy, to that point, yeah, you said nga kanina very early on, ang hirap nung start-stop, ang hirap nung on-off, no? All these false starts. Now, in the past week, it's been a pronounced, practically official paradigm shift. Government now says very explicitly, let's stop talking about community quarantine, let's start talking about granular lockdown. And granular lockdown, that's the new paradigm now, that's the guiding principle behind everything. Is that a more predictable regime at the very least? Can you work with that?
Yes, we can work with that because even if, okay, we are, uh, as an economist, I feel the need to advocate the opening of certain aspects of the economy in order to save whatever's left. Okay, so if a granular regime will allow more businesses to operate, then we're okay with that. Of course, we're also worried about transmissions, and we are worried about that. But it's got to be balanced, no? So whether it's a bubble for NCR or cities that achieve herd immunity or a granular lockdown, either way, so long as certain aspects of the economy can operate, should be fine.
Sir, we were talking last night to Dr. Ana Ong Lim from the Technical Advisory Group of DOH, and well, she did reiterate that vaccines don't really prevent transmission. They only lower the chances of critical infections or very, very serious infections. So her point was a bakuna bubble would not necessarily prevent infections from being transmitted around among those vaccinated who may end up bringing it home to those who are not yet vaccinated or who may bring it out to those in the public who are also not yet vaccinated. So that does raise up the possibility that you would have more transmissions going around despite the vaccinations.
Really has to be calibrated and a compromise should be reached. Because let me just tell you, no, latest figures, you already know that the economy contracted 9.5% last year. And in the first semester, the growth was only 3.8%. So what we're looking at is pre-COVID levels only in the last quarter of 2023. Now, that's not even what I'm most worried about. What I'm most worried about is because of business stoppages, okay, there's no revenues coming into government coffers. Walang tax kasi walang business activity. No tax, no business activity means we're on deficit spending. Our deficit is at 7.5% of GDP, which anyone you talk to, that is a scandalous level. Our debts are already 60.4% as of last March, 60.4%, which is already in the red line limit. So forget the investment grade rating, we're going to be downgraded very soon. Interest rates will shoot up. Plus, we're borrowing another 10 trillion pesos. So with all of this, remember how it was in 1984, 1985, 1986 during the debt crisis. It took us, that's 1986, we only balanced the budget in 2004. That is 18 years. So is this something that we want to put to the next generation? It's got to be balanced. That's my point. It's got to be.
But how much of a salvaging will this bakuna bubble do really? I mean, when you put it in the context of 18 years to pay up the debts that we're already piling up right now, how much will this bakuna bubble now actually help relieve that, if at all?
Got it. Luchi, it's like this. Most of the affected businesses are MSMEs, okay? And even large corporations. Now, because of a lack of cash flow, okay, the non-performing debts of banks are accumulated, and that's no secret anymore. They're already above the 7%. I think they're already in double digit, no? Now, once they reach 15% threshold, you're looking at the, really knock on wood, no? But a worst case scenario, the collapse of the banking system, because you have a pile of non-performing debt. businesses can't pay, businesses are belly up, and the financial system collapses. So what would that mean? That would mean that we'd have to devalue the peso. That makes every Filipino poorer. So, it's a very slippery slope that I feel there it needs to be balanced. Look, the bakuna bubble is one option. The granular is another option. But one thing is for sure, lockdowns cannot go on indefinitely. And lockdowns cannot be hoisted each time there's a surge. It's just not a viable solution, as France has found, as Singapore has found, and other countries too.
And Andrew, even if the bakuna bubbles push through, you think the confidence will be there, the public confidence, because the malls have been opened and people still don't want to go there. They're worried about Delta. They're
Yeah.
they're worried about what might happen to them. They might bring something back to their children, the
Yeah.
elderly, and they might have breakthrough infections.
Yes. Um, Malls, in the model of Bakuna Bubble, kasi malls, we consider malls kasi as community centers. So let's just lump them as one, no? The community centers. They will not discriminate whether vaccinated or unvaccinated. They will accept all. But it's the responsibility of the merchant to ensure that his staff is 100% vaccinated, and they only admit those vaccinated and those unvaccinated but with a PCR test from 48 hours ago. So there's no discrimination there. The whole point is that we're protecting, the model is actually protecting the unvaccinated because they're the more vulnerable ones. And at the same time, not or allowing the vaccinated the freedom of movement and the freedom to save their businesses and the freedom of livelihood. That's the whole rationale.
Okay, Andy, I'm curious about the fallout for the MSMEs, and as you pointed out, that's going to translate to fallout for the banks themselves. So if I emerge somehow still alive out of this, and I want to make a push, where do I go for credit now?
You know what? And that's really the problem, Rob. And I'm glad you really brought that up because there is a directive from BSP itself, BSP Governor Diokno, for banks to be more supportive of MSMEs. But MSMEs are high risk now, no? And the reality is that even existing credit lines are being cut, and loans that are not due are being called. So talagang bloodbath para sa MSMEs natin.
So what would you like to see in lieu of I don't think the bubble is going to push through anytime soon. What measures would you like to see? I think especially for the restaurant group, because people still aren't, I've seen many restaurants reopen, but people are not.
Empty. Yeah. But the reality is restaurants cannot survive on takeout alone. Takeout comprises about less than 10% really. So I think, again, a compromise for dine-in. Let us worry about getting our customers in. Let the merchants worry about that. But if we can be allowed 50%, 40%, workable na yan. At least makakabayad ng payroll, no? At least our employees will not go hungry or would not worry about where their next meal will come from. Kasi at the moment, it's all being shouldered by the corporation itself or the business owner. It's amazing, Amy. When I wrote an article about that, literally hundreds of business owners from across the country, spa owners, yung mga maliliit spa owners, beauty parlor, salon owners, mga tourist-related dive shop, diving resorts, kawawa talaga.
Andy, there must be some bright spots. There must be some silver linings. I mean, over the past, are you seeing any, however small?
In the macro side, I don't really see much reason to be optimistic on the macro side. And also, I have to mention. Let me take this opportunity. I sit in the Spanish Chamber of Commerce, as you know, and I also sit with the European Chamber of Commerce. The policy of the IATF to not allow children to go to school is appearing to be or emerging to be the biggest reason for capital flight, because foreigners and expats, uh, it's been a year and a half, no, and their children haven't been in a school, and it's not healthy for their mental well-being. And really, seriously, many of them are leaving in alarming numbers, together with capital and expansion plans. So I think that's another thing na maybe na overlook ng IATF.
You know, may I add to that? My son, who is almost in college, was saying that many of his friends have decided to take a gap year from college because they find that online education, especially for college, is almost non-existent. They're just being asked to view, parang something that they could do by themselves without having to enroll. So now that you bring it up, no, even that is actually put at risk by this.
Pero Andy, what's the solution there? I mean, that's an interesting problem to bring up. Pero what's a workable solution for everybody?
I would look at the Singaporean model and the Thai model, both of which are very good, and it mirrors the bubble as well. So the faculty and the staff of schools are 100% vaccinated, okay? And the children only traverse school home, the campus and home, and that is they've managed to keep to make it work, no? So not even in Singapore, not even hybrid, no, with remote. Talagang it's really face to face, because studies have shown nga that face to face learning is really a more effective means, especially for higher learning.
Yeah, but Andy, let me qualify that. I mean, always when people compare to Singapore, for one, that's a city-state with a very small population, and practically an island, isolated talaga. You don't have, they can control their borders. That's not a problem. That's one. And then Thailand, Bangkok had to shut down. We're only 2 weeks behind their own surge. Diba? I mean, when you say that was a success, I mean, I'd like to challenge that a bit. You look at Thailand; they're coming out of what has been the most miserable phase of their time in COVID, diba?
I qualify them as a success in relation to their education policy, where they have bubbles for campuses, especially high learning, Rob. So, and this has been in effect in Spain for Spain and France, no, since last year. So it's worked, and you can see their numbers have been manageable, at least in the EU.
But how does that work for school children who have not been vaccinated? Yes, granted na vaccinated na yung mga guro and yung staffers, pero that's only 1 out of 50 people in the classroom. And those other 50 people are probably going to be touching each other and fooling around and doing things that children do.
Well, that's where the 2-week testing comes in. That's where the 2-week testing comes in. So it's a given that the majority of children, especially in elementary or tertiary level, are not vaccinated. So it has to be managed with regular testing, and that has been the functional model around the world. But I think all of us are parents here. I can't imagine how a child can be relegated at home for 18 months without mental ramifications.
Well, that's true.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you about the testing, because in China, for example, the lockdown worked because they had massive testing.
They had massive testing. You're absolutely right, Abby.
Where is mass testing? Would you suggest that we, for example, subsidize maybe testing? Kasi dito sa atin, we fake test because it's so expensive.
So expensive. I think public schools need to be subsidized, but the private ones, I think have the bandwidth, no, to be able to charge. Pero well, that's another issue, Amy. I don't know why our tests are just inordinately expensive.
Yeah.
They're down to PCR test is down to €12, no, in Europe. So I don't know why it costs in the thousands in the
That's
Philippines.
800 or 900 pesos.
Yeah, or 900 pesos. It's just really inordinately expensive. And that's something that testing is part of the equation to fight this pandemic and leading towards normalcy. So that has to be put part of the equation, I believe.
Yeah, speaking of normalcy, let's get back to the concept of bakuna bubble or bubbles, or basically, I mean, starting to try to build at least getting our economy back on track, at least starting with those who are fully vaccinated. We're wondering, because we've asked this of everyone, DICT, DILG, Department of Tourism, LGUs, what's happening with the vaccine cards? What's happening with the vaccine IDs? I mean, you will need that as part of the infrastructure and the ecosystem for any kind of bubble that opens up the economy. But what are you hearing on the private sector side? Why has there been no progress in getting these vaccine IDs?
I have no answer, Rob, for that. I haven't heard anything. The only thing that I've heard is that in the proposal of Joey Concepcion to the IATF, the LGU card will have to suffice in the absence of a national vaccination card. But the good thing about it is that foreign governments recognize the LGU card, our LGU cards. So, and I have firsthand experience from that. In the EU, they recognize my passing vaccination card, which is a good thing.
Oh.
Yeah,
So it's not even the yellow card,
not
pero
even.
they
Yeah.
recognized it. Yeah. Is there anything you think that science, not just here in the Philippines, but across the globe, is not doing enough of? That we seem to be so vaccine dependent on this to put an end to this pandemic. Are you hearing anything, at least in your circles, as far as, say, treatment, di ba? And kasi parang people are under the impression that the only solution is vaccines. And as far as that is concerned, wala tayong habol because we're just so behind in terms of the supply.
Luchi, I've read a study drawing similar lines with HIV/AIDS and the COVID virus. And the defense, it's really an immune system situation. So the defense is bolstering your immune system, and the drugs, and this is what I've heard, the HIV/AIDS treatment is I forgot what it's called, a PrEP, something like that, no? Preparation. It's like a cocktail, no? It's like a cocktail, which is supposed to augment your immune system.
Immune system.
And the same principle that applies to fighting the HIV virus is the same principle for COVID. So so I think in the long term we will have not options, but we will have two defenses. One is the vaccine itself, and the other would be a preparation cocktail. They call it a PrEP, no? A PrEP cocktail to strengthen your immune system. But certainly, we will have to live with COVID. It's part and parcel of our way of life already. Yeah,
We'll have
It's
to
why I'm
learn to
saying-
live with that soon.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's
if
why
it's
not, eh?
if it's the only solution, diba, parang
Yeah.
it has to be soon.
Yeah, it has to be soon. But also, I'd like to underline the weaknesses of the economy.
Yeah.
We don't want to burden the next generation with another 20 years of just paying the debt. That's we all belong to the same generation, and we all lost 40 years of development time because of this. Since 1965, 21 years under Marcos and 20 years to recover from, So that's 41 years altogether. We don't want to be subject the next generation to that. So I really do hope that that the IATF will be cognizant of this, because after everything is said and done, this is not lockdown. Kasi for me, it's a temporary solution to buy us capacity to bolster our our health facilities. If you're not bolstering your health capabilities in time of the lockdown, it's squandering the economic output for that period. This is a health and social economic issue, not a peace and order issue. And I think government has to treat it as such.
Okay, we'll have to leave it there. Andrew Masigan, businessman and economist Andrew Masigan. Always a pleasure, sir. Maraming salamat.
Pleasure.
Thank
Thank you,
you,
sir.
Andrew.
Ingat po.
Thank you.
Please stay with us. The Chiefs will be right back. Welcome back, the Chiefs, here on One News. Now joining us, Senator Risa Ontiveros. Good evening, Senator Ontiveros.
Good evening, Senator.
Good evening.
Ma'am, by now, marami na pong pinapanood kayo kanina sa Facebook, sa YouTube, your presentation about the Farmally International Executives. I just want to clarify something first on the timeline. When you say that these are fugitives, particularly from Taiwan, wanted for embezzlement, securities fraud, stock manipulation, and so on. Ano po yung date nun? When were they first issued these warrants?
Apparently, Robbie, based on the website of Taiwan's Ministry of Justice Investigation Bureau or yung kanilang MJIB, the warrants date from about December of last year. No, yung in-issue para kay Huang Tzuyen, the younger of the Huangs, the one who's heading Farmally Pharmaceuticals Corporation, the Philippine-based company. So dates till the end of last year. Kaya nakakagulat na ulit na awardan ng kontrata ang Farmally just June of this year nung tumatakas na sila dun sa hustisya sa kanilang bansa o sa bansang ito.
Ay, para lang po, to be precise, when you say na imposible, as you said kanina no, sa video nyo, imposible namang walang nakaalam, imposibleng hindi yan alam ng mga top executives or ng office ng mga opisyal at mga ahensya ng Pilipinas. When something like that happens and there's a warrant issued by another country, where should alarm bells be ringing? Which agencies in particular would you have expected to have automatically known about that?
Well, perhaps in our own legal and law enforcement authorities. Pero yung pinaka siguro may immediate cause to check on the bona fides of these individuals, these corporations, should have been the DBM, specifically yung Procurement Service DBM. Dahil siguro naman dapat nag-exercise sila ng due diligence on the background and yun na nga, the bona fides of these persons and companies that they are transacting with, lalo na sa napakalaking halagang kontrata na 3.8 billion pesos.
Ma'am, but is that usually done in major contracts? I mean, I ask it from a legal point of view. Kasi you could have a legal point of view. You could also have what you might say a delicadeza or an appropriate point of view, di ba? So one may not necessarily be the other. From the legal point of view, the local officials who were responsible for the contract, what were they mandated or required to do by law?
Well, for example, to make sure that the business papers were in order, to make sure na yung mga required clearances, for example, from FDA, our own Food and Drug Administration, na super siningil daw sa mga local Filipino PPE manufacturers. Parang sa paglalarawan nila, pinadaan sila sa butas ng karayom. But it turned out that just in the most recent, if I remember correctly, Senate Blue Ribbon Committee hearing, it was put on record at hindi kinontest ng PSDBM or ni dating Yusek Lau na ni walang FDA clearances itong mga PPEs na kinontrata dito sa Pharmally to the tune of 3.8 billion pesos. At yun na nga, kung inalam talaga nila yung katamaan ba at kasapatan ng business papers, they should have found out even before us, even before the Senate Blue Ribbon Committee, na dalawa sa mga di umanong opisyal ng Pharmally Pharmaceuticals gave false addresses here in the Philippines. May mga chismis pa nga umiikot na yung nakatira dun sa di umanong building kung nasaan yung offices ng Pharmally Pharmaceuticals, on the same floor where those offices are supposed to be, sabi nila, walang opisina dito. So parang scam talaga lumalabas. And a third officer on the board of Pharmally Pharmaceuticals gave an address na apparently 3 taon na siyang hindi nakatira doon. So, diba, parang wala pa tayo dun sa usapin ng posibleng overpricing, posibleng graft and corruption, posibleng gross negligence. Yung simpleng tama ba o hindi yung ibinigay na address, kung if they had taken the trouble, alamin yon, or if they had cared to find out. No, napaka-brazen yung negligence talaga dito. Or yung pagkukonsinte sa mali.
Pero would they have taken the trouble considering na si President Duterte mismo yung nag-attend ng meeting? Siguro that legitimizes everything. Saka sabi ni Harry Roque kanina nag-deliver naman daw sa sa kontrata
Talaga ba? Sige nga.
Sabi nga. So ano ang reklamo ninyo dahil andyan naman daw yung yung in-order na produkto andyan naman.
Talaga? Patunayan ni na Sec Roque kung talagang dineliver and to quantity and to specs yung mga items na iyon. At kahit pa mapatunayan natin na okay, nandyan na yung inventory sa mga bodega ng Department of Health o kung saan man nila inilagak, the fact still stands na overpriced yung kinontrata nilang iyon. They bought those PPE sets at an average price of about 1,800 plus pesos sa mga buwan, March and April, or April and May, last year, na ang mismong price cap na itinakda ng DTI and which was being observed then by the DOH was about half of that, only 900 plus pesos. And tama nga, gaya ng sinabi niya, Ms. Amy, well, as I mentioned earlier, why would they take the trouble kung ang solong o pinaka-importanteng bona fides lamang na kailangan nila ay ito ay mga matagal nang at matatalik or malalapit na kaibigan ni Presidente. And it does seem like the cast of characters we are continuing to identify and to draw the links, to connect the dots among them. At talagang ayon sa isang article na nakuha lang namin sa research online, isang artikulo sa Taiwan, their acquaintance dates still at least 2010. Or 2015, bumisita di umano si Presidente sa mga opisina nitong Full Wind Group of Companies sa Xiamen. Yung Full Wind na ang Philippine company niya ay si Michael Yang, ang chairman. Bumisita si Presidente doon sa head offices nitong si Zheng Bingqiang, accompanied by Michael Yang. So kung ito pa rin yung mga kumbaga lead and supporting actors nung kokontratahin na ang Pharmally dito sa pinakamalaking kontrata at para sa overpriced na PPEs, kaya siguro hindi lang ganun ka-brazen pero ganun kapanatag ang loob nila dahil friends na daw sila matagal na.
Well, of course, sinasabi nga ni Christopher Lau, no, na at that time, and we also know that, no, na kakaubusan nga raw ng mask, nobody had really ever heard of the PPE at that time. Madalian talaga. The DOH was under pressure, which is the reason why they passed on the 42 billion to the procurement service. In other words, I mean, doesn't that count for anything, for something, in the reasoning na, lahat naman talaga nun nangangapa, saan kukuha ng mask, saan kukuha ng PPE. And is it fair to say that over the months, na nag-stabilize din naman yung acquisition cost nila? In other words, yun na nga, meron ring natural supply and demand forces na nag-work.
Well, kung sasabihin ni dating Yusek Lau na at that time, no one had heard of PPEs, he wouldn't be telling the truth. Kasi at that time, yung mga Filipino PPE manufacturers na nagbuo ng CONWEP, mga miyembro ng CPMP or yung Confederation of Philippine Manufacturers of PPEs, in fact, nag-retrofit na nga sila ng kanilang mga production line on the request of government at sila ay nag-o-offer sa gobyerno ng kanilang mga produkto. They were made to medical grade, pasado sa mga standards ng Department of Health at di hamak na mas mura. Pasok sa price cap ng DTI at DOH noon. Pero ang daing nila, hindi lang sa pinadaan sila sa butas ng karayong hiningian ng FDA at kung ano-ano pang mga dokumento, tama naman, na mukhang hindi hiningi dito sa Pharmaly, tapos hindi sila na-awardan ng mga kontrata. So, at a time din na nagkakandara pa yung mga local manufacturers natin sa ilalim ng unang lockdown, struggling to survive, hindi pa sila ang binigyan ng ganitong negosyo on fair terms.
Ma'am, yung mga tanong tali-tali, no? But also on one level, paano sila nakalusot sa very stringent bidding and procurement process? Pangalawang tanong, bakit parang ang lakas nila? At pangatlo, paano sila nakalapit sa gobyerno all the way to President Duterte? And to that point, may mga nabanggit na po kayo mga pangalan, pero siyempre nababanggit din beyond Michael Yang, Senator Bongo. You mentioned, I mean, everybody knows now that video in Malacanang with the President. Senator Bongo was there. Now, Senator Dick Gordon was here recently, and he was saying also, as chairman of the Senate Blue Ribbon Committee, our investigations could dovetail into effectively an investigation on Senator Bongo, and precisely trying to make these connections and how this group was able to connect with Malacanang. Are you one of those senators na sabi ni Senator Dick Gordon, tinanong ko nga yung mga kasama ko, handa na ba kayo imbestigahan yung kasama natin? Referring to Senator Bongo. Are you one of those senators?
I'm not yet one of those, Robbie. Hanggat kinakaya namin sa Senado, nagbibigay kami ng ang tawag doon, benefit of the doubt, presumption of regularity, lalo na sa mga colleagues. Pero we will follow all the dots, the clues, the tips, where they lead, gaano mang kalalim, kalawak o kataas, at hanggang kay Presidente. Dahil bukod kay Michael Yang, maya't maya lumalabas talaga yung pangalan o yung muka ni Presidente kahit doon sa video na iyon, which was recorded by the government TV station itself, easily accessible on YouTube. Actually, pulong siya, hindi pa nga dito sa Malacanang, dun sa Davao. Apparently, when the President was there, nag-courtesy call ba yan? Reunion meeting ba yan? Yung mga opisyal ng Pharmaly, kasama si Michael Yang, taong 2017.
Ma'am, that said, what would be logical and fair to ask of Senator Bongo to shed light on?
Well, miyembro din siya ng Senate Blue Ribbon. Well, kahit hindi kami miyembro ng komite, each of us has the right to attend and participate in any committee hearing. So, kung dadalo siya ulit sa Blue Ribbon Committee hearings, as much light as he could shed on this big and growing mystery ay makatutulong. Kasi hindi pwedeng sumapat na sabihin lang ni Presidente, matagal ng businessman yan si Michael Yang. Kasi what kind of business and business people do we want to bring in here? Anong klaseng mga investments at investors? Hindi naman siguro yung ganitong klase. Hindi sasapat na at lalong hindi katanggap-tanggap sabihin ni Presidente na itong, ano bang, may term sila kay Michael Yang na parang siya yung bahala sa pagbabayad ng mga bagay-bagay at binanggit pa ni Presidente yung salitang bayad utang. So anong klaseng utang iyan? Utang na loob ba yan? Paano ba yan binabayaran? Kasi kung yung currency ay itong napaka-gipit na nga nating pandemic funds na kailangan ng ating mga kababayan to survive this life-threatening pandemic, kung yan ay gagamitin nila sa ganyang graft and corruption-laden transacting pa sa mga fugitives from the law in other countries, hindi talaga katanggap-tanggap na hindi yan dapat ilagay sa account ng mamamayang Pilipino na utang na loob. And that would be a totally unacceptable way of paying that back.
Senator, nakikita niyo ba na magsasanga-sanga pa itong investigasyon na ito, that it will go beyond just PPEs and masks, dahil napag-usapan nga kanina yung high cost of testing, halimbawa dito, no? At kung ano-ano na no? So where do you see this going? Plus, we all know ang dami talagang na sita na deficiency ang COA, no? Including many other government agencies. So do you see this going that far and extensively and in the context of pre-election year?
Oo nga. Well, talagang ngayon pa lang habang nag-uusap tayo, I mean these days, this week, nagsasanga-sanga talaga siya. Lalo naming na-appreciate sa Senado yung trabahong ginagawa ng COA to point out where has the underspending been on the part of, say, the Department of Health, saan naganap pala itong malaking fund transfer na wala man lang MOA, wala man lang supporting documents, were any of these funds mobilized in these questionable transactions. Kanina umaga sabi ko nga, bad enough yung usapin ng overpriced PPEs, lalo na sa panahong ito, pero baka bahagi lang ito ng isang mas malawak at mas matinding baho sa likod nito. And you're right, perhaps you're right, Lucina, perhaps it's not just about PPEs, na itatanong na rin yung masks, yung misteryosong face shields na tayo lang bansa ang pinagagamit niyan ng ating otoridad. Yes, the testing, and all the way to the vaccines. Nagtatanong na rin yung mga tao, naku, ito bang maling paggamit ng pera natin ay nasa likod din ng supply problems natin sa vaccines. LGUs are really crying out kasi tumaas na ang vaccine confidence ng kanilang mga constituents. The LGUs have mobilized more vaccinators, but supply is the problem. So, tama ka all of these steps we've known from practically day one, a year and a half ago, na we have to do testing, tracing, isolation or quarantine, and treatment, plus now vaccination. And Congress has stepped up time and time again. Sinabihan kami urgent yung ganito at ganyang mga batas, yung karamihan nila may appropriations. We passed those. We passed the bayanihan laws. We're working again on a pandemic responsive budget. Pero nakakashock yung ganyang COA report na hindi pala ginamit yung para sa healthcare workers, hindi pala ginamit yung para sa vaccines, kahit yung inutang para mag-procure ng vaccines. And now, we have this spectacle of our government transacting with fugitives to misuse public funds. So talagang nagtatahi-tahi yung ganitong mga usapin.
Pero Senator, may warning si President Duterte. You were talking about threats, no? At paano hindi niya pa harapin sa inyo yung mga cabinet members niya? Anong option niyo kapag ginawa nga niya yun? Because he did that already with this PSG chief.
That's right. That's right, Miss Ami. Pero the President should be minded to recall yung ruling ng Korte tungkol sa limitasyon ng executive privilege. So kung pagbabawalan nila yung kanilang mga cabinet officials dumalo sa amin, if they do not honor the invitation of the Blue Ribbon Committee, that would be a contemptible action. At yan po ay magiging palagay ko pagbali sa tungkulin ng executive to exercise institutional courtesy sa separate at co-equal branch nila, kami sa legislature, who are only doing our jobs to oversee the proper use of public funds na galing naman sa buwis ng mamamayan. So, wag sanang gagawin ni Presidente iyan at kung gawin pa rin niya iyan, mananawagan pa rin ako at kaming lahat, I'm sure, sa Senate Blue Ribbon Committee, sa pangunguna na ni Chairman Dick, mananawagan kami sa kanila na you please honor the invitation of the Blue Ribbon Committee.
Pero ano magagawa
But you
ng contempt penalty dahil hindi naman, wala naman kayong face-to-face session. Hindi nyo makukulat ng mga tatanggi. Anong pwede nyo gawin sa kanila?
Well, I think kahit mag-issue lang kami ng ganyang parang sense of the committee na in contempt kayo, hindi kami nag-iisa eh. Dumadami at lumalakas ang boses ng ating mga kababayan na galit. Kasi damang-dama ng lahat itong dusa ng pandemya, itong dusa ng recession, and now to find out that government has been transacting with these criminal types using Filipino funds to buy overpriced PPEs. Aba, siguro dapat pakiramdaman naman ng administrasyon ang pakiramdam ng mamamayan. Hindi siguro sila dapat maging reckless na deadmahin lang ang imbitasyon ng isang hearing na dumarami ang nakikinig, sumusubaybay at pinaniniwalaan dahil gustong malaman din ng mga kababayan natin ano ang totoo para maiwas to, kung maiwawat ko pa.
But anyway, Senator, si Yusek Lau is no longer in government. But actually, my question is, do we know if he's still in the country? As well, do we know if Michael Yang is still in the country, or Tony Huang, or all these other people who have been implicated?
Well, may mga chismis din na umiikot na sina Mr. Yang daw ay pumunta na daw sa ibang bansa, bumalik na daw mula sa ibang bansa, nandirito na naman. Hindi pa namin din alam sigurado, pero inimbita na sila. Inisyuhan na ng imbitasyon na dumalo sa susunod na hearing ng Blue Ribbon Committee sa Martes, kung di ako nagkakamali, 7th September. At si former Yusek Lau, tinanong din anong nakaraang hearing, are you abroad? Are you here in the Philippines? At sabi niya, he's home, nasa Davao siya. So far, he has been able to present himself to the hearings.
Okay, but realistically, process-wise, how much time do we have and how much can you accomplish? It's already September, filing of certificates of candidacy na. Sa totoo lang naman, yan din naman ang sinasabi ng Pangulo, di ba na? Sa totoo lang naman, lahat naman to, wag mo sabihin wala tong connection sa 2022. Let's be honest, the process will not lead anywhere. They don't have any time, and therefore, ang kahihatnan lang nito ay maybe at best may balang oposisyon na pwedeng ibato. All of that is there, but objectively speaking, just on the process, how much time do you have and what can you actually accomplish in that limited time?
Objectively speaking, we'll make the most of the limited time we have left. Kahit pa iisa na lang hearing ang idadaos namin next week, that may be enough time for us to come out with really hard-hitting findings and serious recommendations. At it's funny kung sinasabi ni Presidente iyan na kaugnay lang ito sa eleksyon, bala lang ng oposisyon. Aba, marami sa mga senador na dumadalo sa hearing ay hindi naman oposisyon, nasa majority. Yung iba ay mas malapit o mas malayo sa administrasyon, pero nagkakaisa kami na tigilin yung ganitong klaseng graft and corruption. And, yung mga ganyang salita ni Presidente, bumabalik din sa kanila. People are feeling more and more the pain of this pandemic and recession and the pathetic performance of the administration responding to it. So pag dinagdag pa natin yung ganitong graft and corruption, gross negligence, yung sinabi ni Minority Leader Sen. Frank na premeditated plunder, baka bumalik ito kina presidente at yung mga kandidato nila sa eleksyon. Baka ito talaga yung maging mas decisive. Kasi di ba, ang bawat eleksyon ay paghusga din, pagtimbang ng mamamayan sa isang administrasyon. At judgment nila kung pananatilihin ba nila yung ganyang klaseng paggogobyerno or iibahin na nila. So pag sinabi ng mamamayan na tinimbang ka ngunit kulang, di kuwi daw.
Okay, we'll have to leave it there. Senator Risa Ontiveros, we will continue to monitor this. Until then, maraming salamat po.
Maraming salamat.
Thank you.
Stay healthy
Thank
po.
you. Ingat po.
Ingat rin po. And that's all for this special edition of The Chiefs. We hope what was discussed here will keep the conversation going. Before we go, a reminder to our viewers, mask on, wash hands, stay safe, get vaccinated, Philippines. I'm Robbie Alampay.
I'm Mami Pamintuan of the Philippine Star.
I'm Lucy Cruz Valdez of News 5.
I'm Ed Lingao, and we are One News.